Session. We're going to talk about construction. So if everyone could come up, that would be great. Off you go. So, construction. Why are we talking about construction? It is a highly, highly inefficient industry. It's wasteful. It's a $10 trillion industry where pretty much most projects go over budget, over time, pretty much all the time. So, I've got three great panelists here today. We're going to start with Michael Marks, who is the co-founder, CEO of Katerra. You might know him from his previous life as the CEO of Flextronics. And so, Katerra, you're not a construction company. That's what you told me on the phone. You're not a tech company. You're a design-build company. So what exactly is that?
Well, we are both a technology company and a construction company. But what we mean by that is that we take complete responsibility for a whole project. We design it and we build it. So we have architects, we have engineers, we're the general contractor, we're the subcontractor, we're the materials suppliers. So we just do an end-to-end, fully integrated offering to the developers, much like we did in the electronics industry. We just have different customers.
So you're kind of like a one-stop shop for the developers.
Okay. We are.
Got it. And then, you know, you're basically doing, and I might be oversimplifying this, but you're basically doing prefab housing to some degree.
Well, I don't really know quite what that is. We get a lot of people go like, you're modular or prefab or whatever it is. We make...
What's the difference between the two?
We make building components of all kinds, and we make them in factories, and then we deliver them and build them. We don't build boxes in a factory, which is what a lot of the prefab guys are. We dissect a project into a bunch of parts, and we make the parts, and we bring them on a truck, and we assemble them on site.
And you're doing them digitally too.
And we're doing them digitally too.
And it's not just sort of the windows and the walls. It's the electric, it's the plumbing, it's everything.
So we make walls, for example, and our walls come with windows and doors and sheathing and insulation, electricity, plumbing, drywall. It's a finished. Just think of it as a part number, and that can be any. The difference from prefab, the way a lot of people have thought about it, is that wall can be any kind of wall. And we have lots of different walls. They're just parts, and then we assemble them on site.
Right. So I read somewhere that you can build a 24-unit apartment building every 2 weeks from your factory in Arizona. Is that correct?
Yeah, but that's probably not the most valuable metric. The more important metric is how long it takes to build, let's say, a 24-unit apartment. And today we do that in about 60 days, and by next summer we'll be at 30 days. And that's to the keys, handing over the keys to the developer.
So the 2 weeks thing is more about the component,
that's
right,
the component,
at the factory, right? And then you have to go to the
We
site.
do that just in time, and we don't like store a bunch of inventory. We do it as it's needed for the site.
So you're basically bringing to construction or what you sort of did with electronics and manufacturing. So I know what you're going to say to this because I've asked you this on the phone, but is it, to me, building seems to be like it would be a lot more complicated. So is it really as simple as you say it is to do this?
Well, it's breathtakingly simple at the factory level compared to what I used to do. I mean, when you make a cell phone, we might have, in a factory, electronics manufacturing factory, costs maybe $300 million to do a factory and have maybe 2,500 suppliers, maybe 5,000 different suppliers you're responsible for. You know, a factory to build walls is $15 million, and the inputs are kind of wood and nails. I mean, it's just much, much, much simpler. That doesn't mean the whole thing is simple. You know, design is complicated, and customers are complicated, and there's a lot of different trades involved, so there's a lot to do. But from a factory standpoint, this is a piece of cake compared to my past.
Lincoln, you're
I was just going to say that, like, the ability for you guys to manage a supply chain is critical.
Right.
Right? You're
Absolutely.
not just the subcontractor, you're delivering the whole product, which is an advantage.
Right.
It takes a huge investment to do that. That's why this has been a discussion for the last 50
It's really
to
why
60
people haven't
years.
done it, because being a real global supply chain company is complicated.
So Lincoln is with Turner Construction, which is one of the largest construction management companies in the US. So you're sort of like the innovation guy there, is that correct?
Yeah, it's my title now officially. But yeah, innovation is kind of a nebulous word, of course. For us, for me personally, it's been kind of a position that's grown out of design, technology, kind of grassroots piloting of new tech that's coming out. You'll hear about Tracy's company. That was one of our earlier companies we used several years ago to start. But what I'm doing now is more working with just teams around problem solving and kind of trying to look at what does our business need, what are our core business needs, and trying to bring in tech strategically and kind of drive this argument. Is technology really just getting it out on our job sites and having VR and AR, or is it truly something that we can leverage for our business and kind of have our executive management understand the value?
Mm-hmm. So what are you seeing that is sort of really helping right now? I mean, I think, do your guys sort of roll their eyes when they sort of hear the phrase Silicon Valley is going to disrupt building or construction or?
The disruption part maybe a little bit, but the Silicon Valley definitely not. Like half of my week is spent talking to startups. Some are in stealth. My network with early growth companies is absolutely paramount to our competitive advantage and how we're bringing in the technology. So I'll be meeting with those companies far in advance we'll ever actually use them on a pilot. It's just more or less to learn who's out there, vet them. I work closely with venture capital companies because we share similar kind of interests around understanding, how do we look at technology strategically. They'll obviously look at it from the investment standpoint. We're looking at it from a client's perspective. Who would we want to partner with?
So Tracy is the CEO of PlanGrid. Tracy actually spoke at our New York conference, I guess it was about 6 months ago. And so kind of like what Michael's doing, I mean, you guys are also about making things more efficient, using data. You had some stats on like project overruns on mega projects. Can you remember what those were?
Yeah, so mega projects are billion-dollar-plus projects. If you're from the Bay Area, basically every new tech campus going up, every new hospital in this region is over $1 billion. I mean, it's really sad, the statistics for mega projects. 98% of mega projects sees overruns. Overruns means it's going to be delayed in schedule. It's going to be way above its original project budget. And on average, the overruns in schedule is 20 months. So that's a long time. You could have like 3 babies in there. And then the average cost increase was, I should know this, I want to say like 75% over its initial budget.
I think you said 80. But
it's 80%.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So talk a little bit about how your product helps with this.
Yeah, so in a lot of ways, we're all just trying to solve the productivity problem. Yeah. Obviously, Katerra is solving it in a much different way. The construction industry is incredibly fragmented. What I mean by that is you've got your building owner. They'll hire an architect, maybe. The architect will hire a dozen engineers. They subcontract out the designs. They'll hire plumbing engineers, electrical engineers, structural engineers. And then the building owner will also hire a contractor, someone like Turner Construction. And then the general contractor will hire 50 subcontractors. And working for those 50 subcontractors are another, let's say, 2,000 vendors. So Katerra is saying, look, there's obviously a communication problem at every single step. We'll just take the whole thing, because we're crazy and we're experts in manufacturing, and we're just going to do it all. For PlanGrid, we recognize that there are 10 million people in the US alone that works in this ecosystem. And so we're building software to help people communicate better so that there's no arguments. Because a lot of the times on construction projects, and Lincoln, you know this, we're just constantly pointing fingers at each other because we're seeing these massive overruns, but we don't understand who screwed up. But you should be able to see that in the data.
Right. So with your stuff, if there's a screw up, it's on you guys. Right? Because you own everything. Okay.
We save a lot of time there. It's just like, it's us. I have to add to something Tracy said, a little off script, but this is a fantastic statistic that I got just recently. There are 730,000 companies in the United States that are somehow involved in the construction industry.
How many?
730,000 companies, the average number of employees. 10. There's no industry that looks like that. It's nuts that there hasn't
Yeah.
been consolidation.
The top firms like Turner Construction only employ 5% of the workforce in construction. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Every other industry, the top firms employ, I'm going to say like, okay, I'm not an expert here, but maybe 25 to 50% of the workforce in that industry. And so what you see is these terrible margins in construction general contractors. I mean, a good year, maybe 4% margins. Wow. That's like worse than, we would talk about restaurants having like the worst margins. No, it's construction.
Construction.
Yeah, I mean, I'll interject for a second. It's definitely an industry that's looking to improve. I think, as everyone's well aware of, in McKinsey, everything, CapEx is the same as ag. I think we're at the bottom. So it's interesting to see where we can be strategic as we digitize. Other industries obviously have kind of looked at this strategically, maybe even in advance of construction, but where we're at right now is exciting. So I kind of look at my role as like an opportunity to solve a big problem. It's going to take multiple stakeholders. Some are going to be outside of our company, and that's kind of a culture that's going to have to, that's something that people are going to have to understand.
Right. So I know you work with PlanGrid. Is Katerra a company that you, like, are you guys frenemies?
Let's do it.
Like, how does
We
that?
just started talking about it today.
Oh,
So, digital fabrication, using robotics, it's something that even our competitors are looking at. It's something that Turner strategically works with subcontractors who are doing those things. So we should be talking. So that's definitely, yeah.
so talk a little bit about the types of buildings that you guys build or produce or design.
Yeah, we're primarily in serving the 5 segments of residential, and so that's multifamily, senior living, hotels, hospitality business, dormitories, and single family. And we're, unlike Turner, we're 12 stories and down, so we don't do type 1 high-rise construction.
So is there a limit to what is sort of customizable within that?
No limit at all.
No?
Nope.
And yet, so you can basically design something that could be plonked down on any plot of land?
Yeah, we just started building high-end homes in a resort community in Idaho. We took the designs from the resort owner and converted them digitally and turned them into walls, and we're building the things in 4 months, and they're used to it taking 18 months.
Wow.
It can be anything.
Wow. So Tracy, when we chatted, one of the things that you told me was about the huge shortage of sort of qualified construction workers in the US, I think you were talking about. So let's talk about that a little bit, because you're starting to see what will construction workers, need, what skills do they need in 5 years that they don't have now? And given the amount of construction that's happening, how do we actually keep up with all of this?
Yeah, so I think there's a few reasons why we have this massive labor shortage in construction. We obviously went through 2008, one of the worst years, actually several years, for construction unemployment. I graduated from university in 2007, worst time to come out with a construction engineering degree, but I was lucky enough to work on this hospital project, so I stayed employed. And so we went from like 10 million people who worked in construction in, let's say, 2006, 2007, and unemployment was like up to 25% in the construction industry. And so people were just so jaded because they've given like 20 years to the industry and then they were just fired one day, right? And so the workforce is aging, that's another problem, and it's just like this really not sexy industry, which is really disappointing as a construction engineer because it's so
Speak
rewarding.
for yourself, Tracy.
And
You guys are going to make
so
construction
rewarding.
sexy.
I mean, I've always wanted to be a builder, and that was what I went into. And so they're just not attracting this new generation of builders. The universities are stepping up, the unions are stepping up. I mean, if you look at the industry, it's 91% male. And like, I'm telling you, females can work just as hard and good in the construction industry. In fact, I have one of my best friends is a superintendent, and he's like, text me, he's like, Tracy, we're seeing a lot of female carpenters coming out into the field, and they're good. I was like, what the hell did you expect? And so like, we're missing out on like half of the world right now. And so, we work really closely to trade unions.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing at like even the International Carpenters Union of the Brotherhood of Carpenters is like, posters of like the sisterhood plastered everywhere, because we know that if we could recruit the women into this field, we wouldn't have this problem. 5 years from now, to answer your question, I do think that, well, PlanGrid's not planning to go anywhere, and there's all these new startups that are coming into the space. I do think that there are basic tools that other industries have leveraged that would totally benefit the construction industry. So I don't think it changes building.
I mean, I think it goes back to what I was saying, is just how can we work together, as our business changes and evolves. I'd like to think that we can make it an attractive environment for, the best and the brightest. And that's kind of what, I'm working on right now, is trying to create an environment where people can take an idea and run it up through the company and build it, test it, integrate it up and scale it through the organization. And so that's something that, I think the lights are turning on. People are realizing, lean manufacturing doesn't always equate with innovation. And it has arrived. Technology has arrived. It's just how do we strategically integrate it into our business to allow our younger generation to kind of get excited, have that entrepreneurial bug, but also drive our business. And that's where I'm very passionate about that.
So Michael, you told, you guys are growing pretty quickly, it seems. You've got a lot of demand for what you do. So what types of people are you hiring?
Well, I'll start with Tracy. We have 34% women in our company.
Good job.
So and your number was exactly the number we use, 9% women in the construction industry. So we believe in gender diversity and ethnic diversity. Where we live here, you get ethnic diversity for free. You don't get gender diversity for free. We're trying to hire as many young people as we can. Tracy pointed out exactly what the issues are. It's a very aged population in the construction industry, and the weakening of the unions has had the negative effect here, is that unions were where most people got training with the apprenticeship programs, and there's not as much of that today. So we're hiring a lot of people out of school, and we go to a dozen universities now to recruit, and it's architects, engineers. We're having to do a lot of training though.
But mostly they work for you in the factories, or do they?
In the factories, on the field, we build the stuff. We have people in the field, we have people in the factory. We have, 100 data scientists and software engineers doing various kinds of technology developments. We're developing energy systems and so on. So it's like a regular company in that. Think of it as a manufacturing company, and we have all the different disciplines, and we're hiring young where we can. And the main reason we're doing that is because people from the industry in general, don't take any offense, are pretty old-fashioned in the way they think about this, and it's sometimes hard to change their minds. So we're trying to start as young as we can.
Right. And your co-founder is actually a construction guy, right?
Multifamily developer.
Good. Okay. I'm going to get a question soon, so if anyone has, put your hands up so the mic handlers can come. I think there's one over there. We can lurking towards the stage.
Marty Apple. One simple question. How much have you cut carbon emissions in the whole processes of developing construction over the last decade, and how much more do you think you will cut it over the next decade?
I'll take one part of that. One of the things we have as a mantra is to get rid of as much as possible concrete, which is responsible for 5% of the world's CO2. And there are many ways to do that. So that's a big hitter on CO2 emissions.
Yeah, you guys all actually talk about that a little bit in terms of the social responsibility. Because when we spoke on the phone, you said that's actually helping. You basically said you guys concrete the world. So it's something that you really have
just
to start
our footprint, right? It's
yeah.
like we work in 60 countries. $14 billion in revenue a year. So, I'd like to think that if we can tweak the dial, if we can move the needle somehow. Incrementally, whatever, that will be impacted, and that I find there's a social responsibility in that for us as a company.
And quick funny story, since we're talking about concrete, I remember having an argument with my superintendent ages ago about some technical thing, and then his
what is
response.
Your superintendent in the construction world?
Superintendent is like
not the guy,
the king of the job site. This is the person that runs like a 500-person crew in the field. Anyways,
not like my super in New York. Who
the most experienced person running the crew on the job site. Anyways, quick story. He then said to me, because we were arguing about something, he said, "I have poured more concrete than you have walked on, and this is a measurement of your experience in construction." That was funny, guys.
See, it's not sexy.
But emissions is a massive problem, right?
Yeah.
So 30% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions is attributed to our structures, our buildings, construction, and that's like awful. And so it's going to take everyone to step up to do something about it. Concrete's a good place to start because it's 5% of it, but it comes down to the materials we use, how we design our buildings, how we build our buildings, et cetera.
Right, and I think sustainability has obviously been a major focus of the industry for the last 15 years. I mean, Turner, helped build that council around LEED, but what can we do more than that, right? And how can we actually be, working with technologists or, thinking more creatively about what we need to do for the next several decades?
One of the things that we talked about is for you said that one of the drivers for you, which I thought was sort of unusual in this, is that you actually view what you're doing as helping improve things for the humans in the industry.
Yeah.
So talk about that a little bit.
Well, as construction people, we just don't have the luxury of working close to our job site. So everyone in the construction industry, unless you're manufacturing buildings, you have this awful commute. I mean, we're talking like 2 hours each way, if you're lucky. And then there's also this massive rework problem, which means that we're constantly building off of the wrong information, which means we're stuck behind the job site redoing our work and not getting paid for it. And so everyone has to work overtime. We spend so little time as construction people at our own homes, and this is like people's livelihood. So if we can just make people 1% more productive, given that this industry revolves around like $10 trillion per year, and however many millions of people, if we can just make them a little bit more productive and save them a few minutes each day, we're saving humanity hours, years.
That's correct. Question over there, I think, Michael?
Yeah. Well, you were just on the topic of productivity. The construction industry obviously has had actually lousy productivity numbers for a long time. It hasn't really improved in many years. How optimistic are you that the new techniques that you guys are talking about here are going to move the needle in, say, the next 5 years? How big of a gain in productivity would you expect?
Okay, I'll take that. I'm not. I heard a lot of people say they're optimists. I am optimist too at heart. But being in this role and kind of seeing things, get tested and technology coming in, it's a little bit slower than I think people think. And I think it goes back to contracts and the way we build partnerships across, from the owner down to the subcontractor. How can we kind of redesign some of those partnerships? Because there's a lot of restrictions and regulations around how we have to work together due to those contract structures. But all of that is kind of being developed. Certain regions of the country do things a little differently, a little bit more aggressive with different types of contracts. But I think technology definitely plays a role. It's just I go back to the same thing: is how can folks like Turner be working strategically with folks that are outside of Turner and inside, but how can we team up? I think that's going to really drive this.
Another way PlanGrid looks at it is, how did the rest of the world become more productive? So by and large, everyone has seen a massive increase in labor productivity over the last 60 years, and certainly in the last 20 years. But construction has steadily declined. We are less productive today than we were 60 years ago. This is unbelievable. And when we look at other industries, there's actually lots of economists that have, detailed research on what has driven productivity in these other industries, and they boiled it down to 4 things. It's increased use of information technology, so they started using software. 2, digitization of data, because paper sucks, we all know that. 3, increased competition through globalization. And then 4, something as simple as just process and organization change, which I think is what you're tackling. So PlanGrid's tackling the first 2. Let's use software in construction, and really the first time you could use software in the construction industry was when Steve Jobs announced his first generation iPad. And then digitizing all this paper on the job site. So that's what we're tackling. So
Tracy, just as a technology person now, used to have the construction background, like what is next?
What is next?
Yeah, like what your company is, obviously built on, PDFs and the iPad.
We're crazy. So we have this, we're working, everything is stealth right now, of course. We've got this big conference coming up in June. I hope you attend. We're going to be unveiling a boatload of new products. Lots of stuff.
Cool.
Come over to my office, I'll show you.
Okay.
What is this big conference?
Plan Grid Conference.
You do a plan grid conference?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, why? More questions. Why would anyone want to organize a conference?
Hi, Cindy Jeffers. I was wondering, what are the most disruptive technologies that are coming to construction?
You look at technology all day.
I know. Well, so maybe I can start by, we kind of look at 3 different horizons. Some of the stuff is kind of out there, emerging tech that we want to be aware of. Some of that we're looking at in autonomous rovers, things that can track our job sites, visually document our projects autonomously, given the fact that most people, like you were saying, have no time to do any of this type of work. So how can we take away some of the work that ultimately either isn't getting done or is just painful for the worker to have to do? And then we look at stuff that's incremental, stuff that actually helps my leadership team understand, well, how does innovation work with our business in the current next few years? So we look at things like digital timekeeping, putting out Wi-Fi access points onto our job sites that are connected through Bluetooth, so we can kind of light up our jobs for connection. Things that maybe don't sound groundbreaking, but in the end of the day, like to a lot of our teams, they're highly instrumental.
So I'm curious, and any one of you could take this. Do we actually get to a point where you don't need manual labor anymore to build buildings and things?
Yes.
Really?
I have a very different answer on the productivity thing. I think for the productivity question, I think we get 50% productivity in the next 24 months. But understand, I don't build concrete steel high rises in downtown urban areas. but the answer is we're using automated processes in factories. We're taking a huge, 70% of the labor off the job because we just assemble these buildings instead of construct them a piece at a time. So yeah, of course you're never getting rid of people. We're not trying to get rid of people altogether, but we're trying to automate everything that can be automated.
So your job site would be different to the average job site in that less people.
Way less people.
Way less people.
Anytime you drive your car down a street, you see a guy taking a 2x4 out of a truck and getting a tape measure out, that is going away. Now Turner doesn't have that kind of work, so I'm just trying. This is basically 3 stories or 5 stories and down wood construction, and that's very different. But if you go to Germany or Japan today, there is no stick build. This isn't rocket science.
There's no what build?
No stick build. That's what they call it, where you get one, you go get a 2x4 and you nail it in place and cut it to size, you go get another one. That's called stick build. There is none in Germany or Japan, but it's everywhere in the United States.
Yeah. No, it's interesting because sometimes the discussions I have with some of these companies, the people, in our industry don't go to the machine or the robot. Essentially, if we're going to automate, right now they have to come to the worker. So it's this idea of augmenting or helping them in their tasks. And so, we're working with some companies that are looking at different phases of construction. They won't take the whole phase of work, but they'll look at like drywall, for instance, or scaffolding and try to kind of automate that, but out in the field.
I think you guys can totally go into the commercial space if you wanted to. If you look at high-rise condominiums, for example, the space that you just said you don't do, you look at the common rooms, there's like 100 bathrooms, and they're exactly the same, and they'd be perfect. These types of, you can build them and just drop them in. Or let's say exam rooms in hospitals.
Oh,
That's really tricky, though, just when you brought that up, because as we've implemented prefab out on our projects, like when you have different tolerances, some are, the site-built construction tolerance is there's so much more wiggle room than when you get in the prefab because it's so exact. So I really like the model you guys have because you're owning everything.
Right.
When you try to hybrid it, it's really tough. It's really, really tough because all those connection points on the project physical environment, you leave that to the hands of a team out to install it, and they're like, well, why aren't these bolts lining up perfectly? And that's just not how we work.
And so I think things that people sort of might not know about, underestimated, is that actually on a job site, like you can bring all this stuff in and things literally don't fit together because of, I don't know, the heat or the humidity or the damp or rain or whatever else.
That's why most companies need to have industry experts that, in our industry, I feel like there's great, as far as construction's concerned. Like, so I know you guys have hired great talent, so that's going to help you.
Right. So what will a job site look like from your perspective in 5 years' time? Like,
I hate this question. Sorry. I think you're going to see more and more like sensors out on your job site. You're going to see more collection of high frequency data that's being generated every day. The round trip, because we have trailers, which are kind of our offices out in site, and they call that the field, but in reality it's computers in a nice little trailer, not physically on the project. And so the information from those trailers out to the job site, there's just a lot of lag.
All about IoT then?
So, yeah, I don't want to, potentially.
Okay. Sadly, we are out of time. I see it blinking at me. So thank you guys so much, and thanks a lot.